Good morning, Athens, and welcome to Education Matters, the official voice of the youth. Education Matters is sponsored by your local radio station, Radio-Athens. You can check it out at Radio-Athens.com. My name is Kareem, Lumpkin, and joining me are my co-hosts
Thomas Smith,
Robert Miller,
Malcolm Moore,
and your guest, Bradford Coleman.
But before that, I will give us our words to grow on. Take a chance. All life is a chance. The person who goes the furthest is generally the one who is willing to do and dare. By Dal Charging. So to answer your first question, what is suicide and what is suicide prevention?
Well, thank you for this opportunity. And these are good questions already out of the gate. What is suicide? Immediately, I think of suicide as being just an act of desperation. So it's an intentional killing of yourself. Generally, when people take that act, it's permanent. They want to leave. And very often, it's not that people necessarily want to die, they just want the pain that they're in to stop. So it's not necessarily that they want to die, but in that moment, when their judgment is limited, that can look like the only option, the only way.
well, what are some things that you think make the idea of people wanting to commit suicide a more permanent decision?
I think people feel trapped. I mean, whenever I work with people who were suicidal, it's like your focus narrows, right?
Yeah.
So right now, maybe outside of any depression, when things are going well, life is good, like you have a broad range, you have a periphery, right? Like you can see. But in mental illness, when you're dealing with depression, when you're dealing with some of these other issues, it's almost like your focus can narrow and it can become so focused on your problems, on how bad things are, that then your judgment is now going to be not the best. So now, instead of reaching out for help, instead of trying to brainstorm new solutions, somehow this idea came into your mind. And suicide comes into people's minds in a variety of ways. I mean, it could be maybe a family member. Like, very often, that is a warning sign, right? So like if suicide was maybe in your family, if someone you know who was close to you had committed suicide, your ultimate takeaway from that is that that's a solution. You might not use it right now, but now you know that's an option. Like if you have multiple choice, it might be 10 options on the table because someone you know who's close to you committed suicide. Guess what? Now that box is filled in. I might check it one day, I might not, right? So that is a huge warning sign right there, and something that can almost set you up, put that idea, let you know that, you know, it's okay. It might be a choice for you, you know. So seeing that, seeing it in the media, seeing your peers, right? So it's almost like a social contagion aspect to it, right? So it's like, when I say social contagion, I mean, you observe this in a school setting, right? And now more and more people are talking about it, right? It's almost like cutting. I don't know if y'all have heard about like self-injurious behavior, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
That's very huge in middle school.
Yeah.
So, and it has a social contagion factor where, all right, well, I'm looking at my best friend and this is something she's doing, he's doing, and now it took off to somebody else and they got the idea that, oh, it helped a little bit, and it starts to spread almost like a virus, right? So suicide can almost be the same way.
Do you believe that are there any statistical answers to where there's a specific age in life where more people are committing suicide? Do you know of that?
Yeah. Well, historically, believe it or not, white men have completed the most suicide historically. Generally, later in life, like 50s and up, around the retirement age. And that has usually been the case because They're retiring. Maybe their career, which was a huge part of their lives, is no longer as big of a part. Maybe they got injured. They didn't really want to retire. They got forced out of the workplace. So it's a lot of like stage of life issues around that.
Yeah.
But you mentioned statistics, and especially I just want to read something here from the CDC mentioning from 2018 to 2021 there was an increase of almost 20% with black people in completing suicide. So within that short time range, about 20% increase, and they're saying between the ages of 10 and 24. So it rose by that much. And so there was a lot happening during that time. There was a lot of social unrest. The pandemic. Man, there's so much to talk about with schools closing, with a lot of our interactions moving to digital spaces like Zoom. Yeah. We know that those are not adequate substitutes for face-to-face. Mm-hmm. You know, it might work well for older people like myself and people who are older than me, right? Because you learn how to adapt. But for children, for young people, specifically within this age range, it is not a good change. They don't adapt as well. So like if a lot of your interactions are now online, if your social interactions are through social media, right, and then a lot of the media was very toxic at the time. Yep. I remember it being almost overwhelming for me. I would tell my friends and my wife, I was like, I can't watch this. I'm turning it off. I can't watch another person, another issue come up, right? Mm-hmm. So that happened, and then the pandemic happened. And then we're getting a tracker on the TV of how many people coming and going. That's almost like psychological warfare. I want people to understand what was done to us by the media was almost like psychological warfare. I'm not saying these things aren't important and that we shouldn't know about them, but the way that it was delivered to us, the fear that was injected in it, what that does to us, that's like a steady diet, right? You can't be well on a steady diet of death and fear and all of those things. So, especially, again, I can handle that as an older person. Yeah. Some other people older than me can handle that. But for someone growing up, dealing with those sorts of issues at that crucial stage of your life, that can feel very overwhelming and powerless. I think this generation faces a lot of issues that makes them feel powerless, right? I met so many people, and it shocks me a little bit what I hear, right? So I hear a lot of climate change, the level at which that impacts people, and then also like racism and things of that nature. The reason why I say I'm shocked is because I don't remember being that age, 10 years old, 11 years old, thinking about those things. Yeah. I wanted to play Super Nintendo. I wanted to go outside. We went outside. This was before the internet. When I was that age, we didn't really have the internet. So if I didn't watch CNN on the TV, we had one TV. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if I didn't watch it downstairs, then I didn't really know what was going on in the world. I was enjoying my life, my childhood. Right? So it wasn't like I was getting it at school on the internet, getting it on my phone on the internet. All of this coming at me all the time, making me feel powerless because I'm only 10. What can I do? What should I be doing? I'm 10. I shouldn't be doing too much, to be honest. I should be going to school, maybe, obeying my parents and having fun. Yeah. That's what I believe.
I hope I heard you mention something about the warning signs and about suicide, and I wanted you to give a few examples given your profession.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are a lot of warning signs. Sometimes you see them. Most of the times you will if you're looking for them, but sometimes you won't. We can all be really deceptive with what we show other people and how well we can hide. It kind of just depends on how deceptive we want to be with how we're really feeling. Yeah. But some warning signs are, I would say, hopelessness, right? So if you're meeting with somebody, if you see somebody, and it's almost like the light in their eyes is gone. Like you try to talk about what you're gonna do this Friday, or what they're gonna do after school when they graduate. That was one of my first questions I asked you fellas, is like, what's gonna happen next, right? Hopelessness says there is no future. I don't have excitement about what's coming, right? So if you meet or you see somebody and they're hopeless, also depression, so like a low mood, nothing really gets them excited. You know, maybe things that they used to enjoy, they kind of gave up. I don't know, maybe if he used to love to play football, and now he doesn't care if he gets cut or not. No care. And I'm like, man, this used to be it for you. This was just to get you up in the morning.
Yeah.
You'll talk about whomever, right? And now it doesn't bother that person. They're not interested in it anymore. Maybe they're giving away some of their prized possessions, right? So maybe they gave their phone away. They're not interested in the newest fashions anymore. They're just like, whatever. I can wear dust down clothes. I'm not gonna be here. I'm not gonna be here. That could be the mentality almost of someone dealing with that. So those, what I would say, are some warning signs. I mean, in addition to the person, maybe even just mentioning it. Maybe questions about like, what happens when we die?
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to be here. Like, I wonder what it's like. You know. So if somebody's making those statements around you, maybe in your friend group, or even if you have some of those questions, I would say that's a major red flag. Flag on the play. Go ahead and call it. Go ahead and call it, and definitely get an adult. Right? Just honestly, just get any adult. But if you have more capacity than just any adult, talk to a school counselor, talk to a teacher, and they'll likely be able to set you up and refer you to someone who can help. Even if that just could be your friend, right?
Yeah.
If you're noticing these changes within your friend, talk to them, see what's going on. If you feel like, oh man, this is still not good, I'm gonna tell them, like really tell on them.
Yeah.
I've had so many people say, I'm so happy this person called on me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they told on me. I'm so happy. Like, I was mad in the moment, but I really needed that help. Sometimes people ask for help by putting that information out there, like they'll trickle it a little bit.
Yeah.
That's them perhaps asking for help. They're just going to see, man, this is all I can do right now. I'm depressed. I'm dealing with all of this. I want to just kind of put this out here. And if this person really cares for me, I'm hoping they're going to help me. I need it, you know? So by all means, tell them. And I always say I'd rather have an ex-friend than an ex-friend, if you get the difference, right? I'd rather have somebody who doesn't like me anymore because I told the counselor they said something, or they made a comment, or they made a post. Okay, you made the post. Oh, I made it late at night. I didn't really mean anything by it. Okay, well, that's between you and this other person to figure out. Because you made a comment like that, and that sounded kind of suspicious to me, and I let somebody know. I would rather you not like me, or we have beef for a little while, than that to be a serious issue, and I didn't do anything because I was like, he's playing. He's always making these little comments like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes, and at some points, it can be serious. So.
This has been an amazing first segment, but unfortunately now we will go into our commercial break. We will see you back.
Welcome back, and you're still with Education Matters. My name is Malcolm Moore, and joining me is my co-host,
Kareem Lumpkin.
Thomas Smith.
Robert Miller.
and our guest.
Bradford, Coleman.
And our topic is mental health and suicide prevention.
Yeah, and for this segment, I want to talk about.
Hello.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We have our health fact today. The health fact today is the flu, known as influenza virus. This is an airborne virus that weakens your immune system. The flu attacks your body throughout your lungs, nose, and throat. Young children, elderly people, pregnant women, and people with chronic disease are at greater risk than anybody. Symptoms include runny nose, fever, and etc. To help prevent this infection, people are instructed to wash their hands regularly and eat healthy, along with regular exercise, plus receive a flu shot. That is my health topic for today.
So for the second segment, we will be opening up with mental health and suicide prevention and people of color. And RJ will ask the first question for this segment.
And earlier you mentioned that there was a rise in suicide in color. Why do you believe that there has been a rise in the color of black people doing suicide?
Well, I know what other people are saying. So I think a lot of people and a lot of research is saying that this is happening because of a lack of access to mental health care. So what that means is, right, so if somebody is dealing with some of these issues, they might not be able to get the help that maybe other people can get. They might have to wait longer, right? So mental health care, I'm a licensed professional counselor. It's not free, right? So there are some organizations that offer low cost and some that do offer free services, but generally with those come very long wait times, and you might not be able to work with somebody long term. So lack of access would be kind of one maybe reason why this is increasing, right? So you have some of those things we talked about before, like the pandemic, the social unrest. So think of that as like pressure down on somebody, right? So if you have that pressure down on somebody, but then they can't get help, right? Maybe schools are shut down or it's all virtual, so I can't even those previously helpful resources aren't really there anymore, right? So that's usually what a lot of people say, and I believe a lot of that, and I think that accounts for a lot of the reasons why the suicide rate has increased. But I want to kind of add a few other things. I would say a lack of resilience. I've seen a major increase in the lack of resilience. And when I think of resilience, and when I say that, I'm talking about your ability basically to bounce back. Right, so if you think of a hurricane that comes through in Florida, there are certain trees that snap, and then there are certain trees, like palm trees, and then there's some others that bend a little bit with the wind, right? So those trees are very resilient, so they bend, they don't break with some of those winds and that pressure that's upon them. So what we have is we have that down pressure of some of those things that we talked about on a lot of people, but we have a lot of resilience that's kind of gone now. Right, so I started asking the question, well, what's making people less resilient? These are just my ideas. I always have to ask, when I meet with some of my clients or I'm seeing trends, and immediately what comes to my mind, I would say a lack of community. Like community helps people become super resilient. Right, so when I say community, I'm talking about like I can look left, I can look right. It's people I know who love me, people who are gonna be there to support me. When I was your age, like I hated school. Like, I don't think you understand. When I really say I hated school, I meant I would beg my parents every day to let me drop out. And that was at Clark Central. That was at PHL. Right? So it was terrible for me back then. But one of the things that helped me through was the community that I had. My parents were pouring into me to help me to become a resilient person, right? So when I would come home, they would encourage me. They would strengthen me. They would build me back up. I had friends and family members who would build me back up. So if that collapses, right, your community collapses, man, that's one resilient factor that you don't have to deal with that pressure that's coming down on you. Another factor is, I would say, a decrease in how kind of religious people are, right? So it used to be almost everybody. It was like on Sundays, things would shut down and people would be at church. Regardless of what your faith is, I can talk with an atheist. And I can still talk to them about the benefits of being in community, having that hope installed in you about how do you deal with stresses of this life, right? And maybe even the life to come. So, but if you stop believing in a lot of that, and then you stop connecting with people who believe in a lot of that, then man, this is it. And if this sucks, then I don't need to be here. What value do I have? But if I'm around people, again, even if I don't necessarily believe a lot of the same things they believe, there's still a strength that I can pull from that. Because let's say I don't believe. I meet up with this older lady here, and she's like, oh man, baby, I've been through things like that. Life is going to get better. You know what I mean? Like, oh man, I can pull from that strength. I can meet with somebody else who's saying, you know what, we're praying for you. I'm like, man, I don't even believe in prayer. I don't even know. But guess what? There's still somebody I can look at in the eye who's like, man, he really believes that. He's very genuine in wanting to help me, and he believes prayer is going to help me. That's somebody who I can kind of draw that strength from. But if I don't have that, and if my faith is kind of lacking, and then my community's lacking, but I'm dealing with these pressures, man, what do we expect from people in a lot of these situations?
Do you feel like you're at school, like, I know you talked about how people at school are like going around just passing, like, people at school be cutting themselves and stuff. Do you feel like, and killing themselves, like, and trying to commit suicide, do you feel like that bullying plays a part in that too? Because there's a lot of, like, especially in the media, there's a lot of portrayal, like, suicide, a lot of things related to suicide all come from bullying. Do you feel like that is true?
I believe so. I really deeply believe that. I think maybe my generation and even older, like, we saw bullying as almost like a rite of passage. It was just something you had to deal with. Like, nobody really stepped in. But now I see more kind of anti-bullying campaigns and more awareness that, all right, it's not playful anymore. Like, somebody can get hurt. This is really bothering this other person. And I definitely think what happens, the word we use is internalize, right? So if I'm hearing a lot of these messages from my peers who might be bullying me, whether it's about my appearance, my family, whatever, my intelligence, if I hear that enough, I can start to internalize those messages. And when we say internalize, we mean that's now gotten into my defense. It's in my head now. I start believing that that's true. I start believing that those are even my own ideas, right? You hear something enough, right? Eventually, you're going to start to internalize that message and believe that that's you. Maybe I am stupid. Maybe I don't have a future. Oh, man, I'll never fit in. Man, I'll never be cool like this person or whatever. Something's wrong with me. So now, man, it's not just like that I have these bullies out here, but now the messaging that I'm telling myself, even when the bullies are gone, is something's wrong with me. I'm never going to be like them. I'm broken. I don't need to be here. Nobody loves me. That's a big one. Nobody loves me. I hear that a lot. I heard that today, actually. I heard that today. So that's how prevalent that is, right? That could be the internal messaging. Nobody loves me. Nobody's here for me. Nobody cares about my problems. So if I believe that, those are really heavy messages just to lay on anybody's shoulders, but especially a young kid. If I believe that, then yet again, that's going to feel like an option to start doing something desperate.
I also wanted to ask you, going off of that, why do you think black families or black parents tend to, I don't want to say ignore, but I did say ignore in my notes.
Okay.
Ignore mental health of their kids and don't see the signs as much.
Man, okay, I've worked with a lot of parents. I think it's like a cultural generation divide, because very often the parents will say, well, I've been through it and I'm fine. Why can't they? You know what I mean? Or it's not that serious. Like, I went through worse, right? And that might be true. I don't know that parent's story. Like, that really might be true. Okay, it's not a competition. That's generally what I tell the parents, right? So it's not a competition. It's not about who went through it the worst and everybody is different. Every child is different. You might have had more resilience built into you, or who knows what. Maybe you were just built better, right? I might tell the parents that, all right, if it's a competition, maybe you just built better. So what? Now, what does that mean for the child? How can we get back to helping the child? You know what I mean? So I think it's like a generational thing. It can be easily dismissed, And also, sometimes the kids aren't as clear about how serious it is either, right? So like, if everything's an issue, I'm not saying you can be dramatic, right? But if everything's an issue, then how do I know what's really an issue?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and so that's how you kind of express yourself, is how you can really ask for help and be persistent about asking for help. And getting the message through to the parents. You mentioned the parents. I want to just say something here. there's this huge test it's a questionnaire that came out like in the 80s. It's called the ACEs test, or the ACE test, the Adverse Childhood Experience Test. Have y'all ever heard of it or anything?
No.
Alright, it's only 10 questions, and I don't want y'all to answer these live.
Is it like-
Don't put your business out.
Is it like it's like the test that they make us do, like saying like what's your race or what's your ethnicity and do you like school and what is the best thing about school?
No, it's a little bit more related to like some of your negative experiences.
So is it like a test I took at school about do you do these types of things over, or how you feel about them?
Yeah.
It could be similar to that. So I have it right here, and again, no, don't answer anything. Okay, but this questionnaire came out, and they found that the higher the score, the more likely that you're gonna have health issues, mental health issues, and all of this is like based on your childhood. So you give this to somebody and they think about their first 18 years of life. That's what they're asking you, right? So as a minor, how would you answer these questions, right? So did a parent or other adult in the household swear at you, insult you, put you down? Don't anybody answer. I'll answer, okay? I'll come up with a hypothetical. So somebody might be, yeah, my mom and my parents would often cuss at me, and it was, it was a joking thing. Everybody was cussing. Okay, they're not judging, but you go ahead and check that one box. But yes, another one would be, did a parent or other adult in the household push, grab, slap, or throw something at you, right? So you might answer that question, well, yeah, I mean, when I was really bad, I would get slapped. Okay, and I was getting cussed out on a regular basis because I was being bad. Okay, they're going to be like, well, check another box. What they found is, if you have 4 boxes, that was only 2 questions, it's only 10. If you have 4 or more, you're at high risk of developing health complications and mental health complications, like physical health complications and mental health complications. What they're doing, again, is they're looking at your childhood experiences and they're totaling all of this up and they're saying, man, your outcomes are not going to look good if you go through a lot of these negative experiences. So whenever I talk with parents, I'm like, yo, we got to tailor the home to make sure as best as possible that your child is not going to get this exposure. I'm going to read just a few more if you don't mind, okay?
Yeah.
So another one is, did an adult ever touch you inappropriately, right? Do you ever feel like no one in your family loves you? Was a biological parent ever lost through divorce or abandonment, right? So if you don't know your father or your mother, or somebody died through abandonment or loss, that's another box. So for a lot of people, before I could even get to number 8 or whatever, they're already maxed out in terms of how their early childhood experiences are going to impact their health outcomes, or how it can impact. Right, so that's how serious it is. Some of the stuff that we go through, we're kind of flippant about. Oh, I'm just getting cussed out, or oh, that just happened to me as a child and I should be over it, or yeah, I know, my mom went to prison and it was no big deal. She's out now. Well, again, research has shown this can and it likely will impact your health if you don't start making some changes, if you don't address it.
I have a question. So a lot of times, like, there's this movie, I don't think anybody has saw it, but it's called Pressures. The black girl. It's like, and she was a person, a lot of her box would be checked out because her mom, she didn't know her dad, and then she did, but he was never in her life. And then her mom was never like, her mom never like really cared or loved her until it was too late, and her child actually started it. She had with child. It's kind of like, graphic, but her dad essentially like raped her, and she had a child with her dad, and so her mom was upset that her mom would throw things at her, make her unconscious, and then so people started to realize that that she was, her teacher started to realize that she was in a bad home, so I tried to help her out. And like what I was going to say is like some parents, whenever you tell that do they like actually like show the signs that they actually do that?
Okay, first of all, that was a good movie reference you threw in right there. I really enjoyed that movie because, like you said, it showed the reality for a lot of people, it might have been extreme. Somebody might have said, okay, there's only some of that happened to me, not all. But it kind of showed you what is out there, right? And so some parents, they do engage in that sort of behavior. They do recognize it, you know? And again, if I'm ever working with the parents, I kind of put the pressure back on them, right? Because again, if we're talking about somebody under 18, we're talking about a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, it's up to the parent, in my opinion, to tailor the home in such a way to help that child thrive as best as possible, right? So let's say we can talk about no hitting. How about this? Like, this is a big deal for me. I never grew up around filthy mouths. And filthy mouths, I don't really like that, you know. And so I talk with the parents about, you know what, we got to find another way to express your anger. We got to find another way, right? Or how about this one? How about telling your child that you love them and giving them a hug? You would be shocked by how many people I've come across, and I'm like, man, you never heard your mom say that? You never heard your dad say, I love you, right? Or come up and hug you? That's wild to me, right? So again, that's that person not having resilience built into them. So that person who's never heard that or had a hug, they go out into the world, deal with all these pressures and things. Again, they haven't been built up in such a way where they're going to be strong enough. So then eventually there's something that comes along and it breaks the camel's back. There was one thing here that I also found. I was doing a little research and preparing for this.
Yeah.
They found that, and this is Dr. Sheftal, an associate professor at the University of Rochester. She found that 40% of black youths who had completed suicide, they found that they had a relationship crisis right before the suicide. So there was some sort of conflict with family members or a boyfriend or a girlfriend. So they said almost half of those minors who were committing suicide, who actually followed through with it, they went back and looked and they said almost half of them had some sort of beef, some sort of conflict immediately before that. So she was saying, man, this is a conflict resolution issue where people are taking whatever's going on right then to the extreme and they're just doing something desperate in the impulse in the moment.
Yeah.
That's what they found. So that I would learn that. You know, that was really crucial and important for me to learn. And she was saying, you know, it has a lot to do with conflict resolution. Very often our conflicts can escalate quickly with parents, with teachers, right? I mean, with anybody, like somebody on the street, a neighbor. Our conflicts can escalate almost too quickly. And so now we're in dangerous territory and we're making forever decisions. We're making decisions that can impact us and lead us to incarceration, can lead us to hurting somebody else. And I mean, this is with a teacher.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so it's a conflict resolution issue. And I'm really grateful for that research that she did because, again, even as a clinician, I wasn't even aware of that component, that many people who ended up committing suicide had relationship conflict right before. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I'll throw that to you guys. How do y'all think you handle relationship conflict? Like, do y'all see that being handled well at school, or?
I mean, well, there's a lot of people at school, especially middle school, people start to like, you can't really call it dating, it's just saying that you like somebody and then they go out with you. Because I feel like people don't really like, most of the time they always get depressed or they're always get into fights. I've seen it before it actually happened last year when I was in 5th grade. There was people like fighting over this one boy, and whatever he did, if he went with this person or if he went with this girl, one of the other girls that didn't like that person would just cause a lot of drama. And it was mainly going back and forth between him, like somebody wanted him, the other person wanted him, but almost like kind of like, you know how like there's that story where the baby, like two mothers wanted a baby or something, and they were like ripping, like grabbing each other, it's kind of like that representation, because like like that person could never like really go with anybody without someone saying something to him or someone saying anything.
And now we'll be going into a commercial break. Welcome to Education Matters. My name is Robert Miller, and joining me are my co-hosts,
Kareem, Lumpkin.
Thomas Smith.
Malcolm Moore.
and our guest.
Bradford, Coleman.
And I'd like to pass it to Thomas to the next segment.
So for this third segment topic, we will be having a conversation about mental health and suicide and student and professional athletes. And I did have one more question referring to the last segment that we just did about why do athletes and people of color tend to not talk about their mental health with others?
Well, you asked me, and I immediately asked what sport you played. I was like, okay, you guys are in the huddle. I was never an athlete, so I didn't know about that life. But I have known a few people who sought help, who were athletic, and who competed, right? I would say immediately, I could even feel the pressure that they felt. It was a lot of pressure, right? And some of them weren't necessarily scholars, okay? But then there was that component too about the academic. It's like, man, in order to continue to do this, I got to continue to do this, and I'm feeling pressure from here. One thing that comes to my mind immediately was one person shared with me, this is all that people expect of me. Right, he was a big guy. He was probably on the defensive line or something, right? And it was almost like nobody even saw him or cared about him. They just saw his stature. They just saw what he could do, whether it was on the field, on the court, or whatever. And he was like, he didn't really like the sport. It was just like, you know what I mean? And he felt that, and it's just like, man, that's crazy to me because that had never really crossed my mind that you could be in that position. And not even like it, and not feel seen or heard or valued for anything else that you bring, right? And ultimately, that's going to come to an end. Let's say you make it all the way. You go high school, college, pros, whatever. It still eventually will come to an end, right? And then you're still left with those questions of like, man, well, what else do I bring? Who am I? If this is all people told me, right? In addition to that pressure and stuff. So that's why I would imagine. It's difficult to talk about some of these things if you're gifted in those ways. People already hit you with their expectations for your own life before you even know what's going on.
What you just spoke about, like athletes, and then there's also another reason, like people expect them to win and stuff. Like there's a lot of pressure, like. Especially like, cause kind of like parents say, well, you have to win. It's not not all parents say that, but most of the time it's like you have to like show your parents like you basically winning is important, and that's what like basically the game is kind of about. I mean, you could play any sport, but then the only goal to do is end up on the team and play and win the game, so you can go. I guess the championship or something, and I feel like that's what athletes have a tough time doing, because I feel like, oh, I need to win this game, I need to do all this, I need to do this, so I can be perfect, so nobody will say anything to me.
That's a great comment. That's so true.
So going off of that, I also wanted to ask you, why should the mental health of student athletes and athletes in general be talked about more? Because I feel like it's not brought to the light as much. And I heard Kyrie Irving talk about this like a year back as well.
Man, you gotta ask the coaches. I feel like the coaches are the gateway, right, to the whole team. And I mean, coaches kind of play so many roles already.
Yeah.
I mean, they're there to motivate. They're there to pick someone up, to discipline. They're doing a lot. I have heard of some coaches who are beginning to integrate mental well-being into the vernacular and into kind of the culture of the team, right? So I think that is important to maybe help the coaches work to integrate that into the culture. Sports psychology is a real thing. There are a lot of professionals who know a lot about this area and how to work with athletes, and not only on performance, but on the holistic person. Like, okay, that's great that you're gifted in this way. We're going to work on maximizing your performance, but at the same time, how are you doing? Right? Let's not talk about basketball for a little bit, right? How are you doing in these other areas? How are you dealing with this pressure? How are you dealing with maybe this injury that you're trying to rehab or whatever, right? So there are a lot of resources that are out there. I just don't know if the teams and the coaches are always trying to integrate and bring that to the forefront.
Yeah.
You know, I think they're trying to do so many other things that maybe that gets lost.
Yeah, I relate a lot to what you said because I've played football a while. I started playing football, pee-wee football, when I was around 7, 8 years old.
Started early.
And I stopped playing football around middle school. But then, you know, coaches in middle school, you know, seeing a big guy always asking me, "You play football? Do you play football?"
You getting headhunted
You
in the
don't play
halls.
football.
You
Yep.
couldn't even make it to the bus.
Yep. And I always told him no. But then I went to high school, same thing. You play football, you play football. And then for once, I actually took the offer. I said I wanted to play football. I started playing football freshman year. And I realized I didn't enjoy it at all. I tried it, I didn't enjoy it. And I felt like I was only playing football just because friends who also played football and coaches wanted me to play football. And I feel like nobody ever asked about RJ the person, Robert the person, not the football player.
So that touched you. That's a reality. Yes,
I
it's
feel that.
yeah.
What RJ said, and a lot of things, athletes, like, it's like, oh, I think you and RJ touched on this, athlete, like, people be like, oh, well, especially if you're tall person, there'll be people ask, like, do you play basketball? But that's not the point. Well, my point was, like, people feel like you can't really do anything else. Like, if you just play football, that's all you're supposed to be known for. Like, you can't do anything else. And you just have to play football because that's what you're known for. And a lot of times it's probably because of people's sizes. Like, they'll get recruited even though they've never played football. And then they'll realize that I never wanted to do this. And they just have to because there's a lot of expectation on them.
That's a really good point. I mean, not only just regarding athletics, but it could even be academics. I mean, I used to work at Savannah College of Art and Design. I used to work at Valdosta State. So I've been in a lot of different university settings. Right? I would meet with some students and I'll ask them, why are you here? Right? Like, they couldn't tell me. They'll say, you know, well, my parents expected me to be here. I'm supposed to be here. And I'm like, well, you're not doing too well, not only academically, but like personally, you know, because what's going on is you're not living authentically in a way that lines up with who you are, right? So we got to find out, like, well, what do you want for your life? I'm happy that your parents want this, and I hear them loud and clear, and that could be a good thing. Maybe they could push you a little bit further than you thought you could go. But let's, again, move that to the side, and let's talk about, well, what do you want? What do you envision for yourself? And often, people haven't been given the space to explore that. There was one person in particular, this person did not want to be in college. They wanted to go and be an entrepreneur. And we talked about that. We talked about that hustle, grind life, and, you know, it's not going to be easy. And they decided that that was what they wanted to do. They wanted to pick up a little certification on the side and work that out. The person's doing really well now, right? And because this person found something that was in line with who they were, right? So whether it's sports or academics, especially as you mature, it's figuring out who are you outside of certain expectations that are placed upon you. These people who put these on you, like, they're not evil people, right? But what we work on is getting you to be stronger so that what you want, your voice is heard a little bit louder. We're not trying to silence other people. We're not saying nobody can speak into your life, but we're working on getting you to be a little bit stronger so your voice is heard. It's like, nah, Mom, I know you wanted me to do this. I love you, but I'm gonna go love. You know, and I speak to people who are closer to adulthood on that. I'm not talking to a 10-year-old necessarily. Going left on your mom. Don't do that.
100%. And now we will take a commercial break.
And we are back, and you're still here with your host, Thomas Smith, and your co-host,
Robert Miller.
Malcolm.
And Kareem, Lumpkin.
and my guest,
Bradford Coleman.
Today on Education Matters, we are discussing mental health and suicide prevention, and this will be the fourth and final segment of today.
So do you feel like what was the topic that we touched on last segment?
Injuries with football and sports and mental health on sports.
Yeah, I feel like that I feel like that mental health starts becoming a major thing, and that's what I feel like in sports is when people either get hurt because you feel like you got hurt, so if you get hurt really badly, you realize you can't play that sport anymore, and people get so up and emotional, and they feel like there's nothing else for them to live with. I mean, that sport was going to get them places. Like for example, like there was this. Well, it's not really a real person, but it's a scenario. This person was playing football, and he was finna go to college, and he was gonna be the number one picked or observer pick or whatever. And all of a sudden, he breaks something that he needs to use to play football with, and all of a sudden he can't play. The doctor tells him he can't play football anymore, and then people just are emotional for one, and then they just feel like, what's the point of me living if I can't even play my sport that I've been playing since I was 5 or 4?
Yeah, that's again another really great comment there, and you're absolutely right. So just the difficulty with adjusting to maybe something that you've prized your whole life almost kind of being taken away, right? And so if I'm working with somebody with that issue, I'm going to work to create the space that will allow them, for one, to just kind of get that off their chest and to grieve, right? Because there's a process where it's like, man, I might have to let that dream go. All right, so you're letting the dream go, but we also have to work on developing a whole new dream.
Yeah.
Because that's very one-dimensional. And we talked earlier about being resilient, and being resilient is, man, that knocked me down, but I'm not going to let that keep me down. I have to find something else. I have to make a pivot.
Yeah.
Right? And so I will be working with that person to help them pivot at first in their own mind. Like we're gonna silence what other people gotta say. Mm-hmm. In your own mind, we're gonna work to make that pivot that, I do have other things. I do have a future still and a life worth living. It's gonna look different than what I thought it was gonna be, but that's okay. It's gonna just look different. And then work to install that hope and almost excitement. I'm a strategic person, I play chess, and that to me is like a strategic move. You can get excited about the adventure of life, all right? That change, you thought you were going down that path, change, right? You jump into something new, right? You hit random character select, okay? And now something new is but you can get excited about that and the possibilities that lie in front of you now, right? And so very often I'll be working with that person for a long period of time, I would say, maybe a few months, close to a year, to really make that pivot, help that person.
Why do you think people in general have a hard time with reaching out for their mental health? Why do you think people would rather hold in their feelings about their mental health than tell somebody?
Yeah. I mean, I would say we replicate what we observe growing up. Like if I grew up and if everybody eats their anger or their emotions, or if everybody punches holes in walls, or if nobody says anything about anything, but we all can feel the tension in the house, but nobody says anything about it. Yeah. Very often, if we don't check those patterns, we're going to continue a lot of those things.
I think it's called generation something problems. It's where let's say your parents whooped you as a child, then because they were upset at you for doing something bad, then it continues when you first have a child and they do something bad. It's just an ongoing thing, and it's also kind of also turned from a behavior to an instinct because that you think that your parents did this and you turned out fine, so I can just do this to my child. And then, but most of the time, people always push their emotions down. Like whenever like have that generational problem, people push their emotions down until it finally explodes, and then there's explodes, and like you go off on people, and you never mean to. It's just something that you had something that you dealt with during when you were a child.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great comment. Great coming in with the good comments. It's so true because we have to learn how to express ourselves, to let steam off. Like a lot of us don't have good coping skills. I'm gonna be honest. For a lot of us, our coping skills might be gaming, it might be media, it might be smoking, it might be drinking. I'm just being honest. I see a lot of adults, right? And for a lot of black people in particular, I'm super stereotyping. But that's a lot of what I see, right? Versus when maybe I'm talking to a white client and they're like, man, I gotta get into this marathon, right? I'm gonna go out here and fly this kite, we're gonna play some ultimate frisbee, right? We're gonna go do these other things, these healthy things, go to the park, get out. I'm gonna get into some woodworking. I got some hobbies. Y'all are moving into an area that I love to talk about is hobbies. I have a lot of hobbies, and hobbies are really important, in my opinion, in building resilience. Because it's something you can gain a mastery over, meaning you're going to get better with that over time. So you're building your self-esteem immediately, right? It's something that you're good at, and it's just yours, right? So if I like to work on cars, like I don't necessarily need anybody else to do that with me, right? If I like to garden, I can go be in the garden and just be out in nature and in beauty. If I just like to go walk or, rollerblade or whatever. So, I mean, we have to work on building our hobbies and getting some of these other coping skills so that when life comes at us, we'll have resources.
So I had this very big question before this whole thing comes to wrap. I wanted to ask, because I've dealt with this before, and I also wanted to know, but how should someone ask or approach their friend or significant other about their mental health, and if they know the person is experiencing problems with their mental health?
That's a good question. I'm a direct person. You can just put it out there. I think very often people need that conversation normalized. So that's kind of the word that we use, right? So as a therapist, what I would do is normalize a conversation by just bringing it up. So then you know immediately we can talk about the death of your grandmother. We can talk about what happened. I'm just normalizing it. We can talk about what's happening here in terms of sex, what's happening here in terms of violence, whatever. I'm normalizing that conversation. So you can do that with your friend. But then also just listen. Very often people don't listen, they just wait to continue talking. I'm being real, like they just wait to continue talking. Like I have a lot I want to say. I left the pause for you to just say something. I don't really care what you about to say because I got to get back to what I got to say. You know what I mean? So like if you ask a question like that, like really have an interest and know how to kind of be silent and really love that person and listen to that person and let them know that they have your full attention. And I mean, if this is somebody a family member or a friend, like just hold your tongue. Like, okay, empathize. You have to build that trust and that level of, man, I'm here with you. I might not have the answer, but we'll figure it out together. I'm gonna be here alongside with you throughout this until we figure it out. That's often, like that alone helps a lot of people. You don't have to necessarily go see a professional. Like honestly, I mean, in an ideal world, like I would have a very small caseload and there wouldn't really be a great need for mental health professionals in an ideal world. We can hopefully get a lot of these resources naturally and build these into our lives so that we can bounce back. That's my ideal. I mean, there's much more severe mental illness, severe persistent mental illnesses and things of that nature. But if we're talking about these sorts of things, then
Well, do you think parents use themselves as an example and think they can do the same thing, their child can do the same thing? Like, for example, say a parent was an athlete, but their child wants to be a lawyer. Do you think they want to push them to more be an athlete than what they want to do?
that can be a thing. I think that does happen, right? And it's very tempting for parents to just not do that, not put that pressure, put that expectation out there. I think that's something some parents do struggle with. Yeah. Because, I mean, it's almost like it's more about them in those moments than their children. And again, I would never disparage parents. I really believe in honoring our mother and our fathers, but helping them to understand that, man, all right, you might want to fall back. You had your life. You got your life. I want to help you live your life. Okay, so you live your life to the max. Be happy. Get that, right? All right, now, your child is a little bit different.
Yeah.
They might have a different idea. You might need to work on accepting them as they are.
So every one of our guests that comes on here, we always have to ask the essential question: why does education matter to you?
That's a hard one. I love education. I have a lot of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Paying loans. The loans are back. The loans are back. You know, buying frozen for a little while. I think education matters because for a lot of people it is a way to freedom. It's a way out. It's an avenue to honestly whatever you want to do, whoever you want to be in life. Right? So whether we're talking about college, or whether we're talking about a trade, or whether we're talking about just getting knowledge, like I'm open to all of it. But I'm saying if you're not gonna go to college, you still need to get your knowledge. Like, how are you getting your knowledge? What books are you reading? I'm reading about 2 or 3 books right now. Like, how are you getting education, formally, informally, into your life to improve your life, to expand your mind, right? Do not be limited. Who you are today needs to pale in comparison to who you want to be tomorrow. You know, if ever I meet somebody and they're 40 years old, I'm like, okay, well, what did you do with this time? Do not waste time. It's the only resource you cannot purchase. You're not going to get it back. So I think education is a really great investment of your time to be, again, whoever you want to be. If you want to be a nurse, if you want to be a pediatric surgeon, if you want to, I don't know, work on railroads, if you want to fly an airplane, if you want to, who do you want to be? And I feel like that in our community, we don't talk a lot about dreams and aspirations, right? It's almost like a few boxes we can fit in, and that's like a template that's given to us, and it's very limited. You can be whoever you want to be, right? If you set yourself up and apply yourself. I really believe that.
Thank you for listening to Education Matters, the official voice of the youth. Education Matters is sponsored by Radio-Athens.com. If you missed any portion of this program or would like to hear it again, it can be heard Monday at 5:30 p.m. or Tuesday at 10 a.m. on Radio-Athens.com. You can also listen on demand at YouTube channel educationmatters.com network. Education Matters is a production of the High School Completion Initiative.